Fortnite has released hundreds of items and had many great and very bad metas throughout these seasons. But what would the perfect meta look like? Well, I've actually already covered this in an old video, but so much has changed since then, and I've had so many requests to do this video again, so let's find out. Let's start off with assault rifles, and first I want to break down what bad examples of assault rifles actually look like. And firstly, if they are scoped and hit scan. A lot of the weapons from chapter 3 and 4 and early into chapter 6 as well, such as the hollow twister assault rifle, the red eye assault rifle, and the twin mag assault rifle, all had a scope and were hit scan. Now the issue with these is honestly they're just too easy to use in Fortnite. Because you only have a certain limit to how many heals you can carry in your inventory, having the main weapon that players carry be very easy to hit a 25, 30, 40, 50 damage on just means that you consistently waste your heals over and over again. Also for storm surge tags, these are just far too easy to trade with, so generally I don't like to see these in the meta at all. Scoped weapons that actually have bullet drop, such as in chapter 5, I actually really like, and I think they can work really well. However, it didn't seem like bullet drop was very favorable for the vast majority of people who played Fortnite, so I don't think this is a main option for the assault rifles. The exception to this is DMRs, because currently in the meta that we're playing right now, they have a scope, but they are not hit scan, and I think this fits really well into having a longer range weapon that is a little bit more difficult to use, because again, it's not as bad for surge trading, although it still happens every single tournament. Now in my eyes, I like a meta that's split into 3 different assault rifles. Firstly is the regular, the second is a faster fire rate, and then the third is a harder hitting, slower fire rate one. So in this instance, I think the best normal base assault rifle is just the base OG assault rifle. It has good damage per shot, but only has 30 bullets per magazine, and the fire rate is only 5.5, so it doesn't bleed through turbo build if you're just spraying at players who are far away. Yet it's actually very rewarding to use, and it's good in medium, long, and close ranges, but it's not too overpowered in any of these. The faster fire rate assault rifle is probably the Fury assault rifle, whereas a 7.45 fire rate in comparison to the assault rifle's 5.5. To counter this, it has a lower damage per bullet, and the damage per second is roughly the same, both of them in blue rarity being around 180. However, the faster fire rate ARs like the Fury is more difficult to use at longer range and better in close range, so you have a reason to pick it up over the regular assault rifle if you're actually going to be more aggressive at W keying. And then the final is the slower assault rifle, which I'm going to choose the OXR rifle. Now this has a slightly slower fire rate than the regular assault rifle, making its damage per second 155 in comparison to the 180 that I mentioned before, but it has the advantage of having higher damage per bullet and a higher headshot multiplier being 1.75 in comparison to the 1.5 of the other assault rifles. So with this assault rifle meta, you basically have 3 different options to fit whatever playstyle you're going for in that specific match. If you look at the meta that I've actually said here, this is pretty much exactly the same as our current season, just replacing the regular assault rifle with a hammer assault rifle. So let's move on to the shotguns, and I have a lot of comments about things I do not like about shotguns. Firstly is high body shot damage. So let's take the Havoc pump as an example. A lot of people use this as some of their favorite shotguns, but in my opinion, this is one of the most busted of all time. The Mythic, for example, does 138 body shot damage, which just seems unnecessarily high. I think shotguns should reward a big headshot damage because that should reward good aim, such as the hammer pump shotgun and the striker pump, which I think both did a really good job of keeping balanced body shot damage with higher headshot damage. I also don't like higher structure damage, so the sentinel pump is an absolutely great example of this because it makes the pickaxe much less valuable. Fortnite's been in a trend recently of increasing the structure damage. In particular, if you look at the Jawa blaster shotgun from the Star Wars season, where the blue rarity did 154 structure damage, which can just destroy any fully built wood wall. In the previous year, of course, the gatekeeper shotgun was in, and I just don't like how little risk there is to shooting a wall with these weapons. If you have to pickaxe instead, you're completely vulnerable while this weapon's out, whereas if you're trying to shotgun a wall and the other player makes an edit, you can still hit them with that shot. I also don't like longer pullout time shotguns anymore. Now, I couldn't believe coming into this season, the Double Trouble has a 433 millisecond pullout time, because if you've used it, it feels quite slow to pull it out, and this is actually the OG pullout time of almost all shotguns. This season, however, and this year, the Sentinel pump is 300 milliseconds, same as the hammer pump was in the last year. So more recent shotguns actually have a faster pullout time, and now going back to playing older shotguns actually feels quite slow and quite clunky. I also hate shotguns where you have to reload them all at once, like the ball old shotgun, for example, you shoot 12, well, it's got 6 bullets or 12, whatever it is, and you have to reload the whole clip at once rather than just reloading one single shot at a time. A lot of these shotguns are already worse than the other shotguns in the meta, and they're just nerfed by the fact that you also then have to reload the whole clip at once, making you very vulnerable at that time. Now, if you notice, all 4 of these talking points I just made, high body shot damage, high structure damage, long pullout time, and the fact that shotguns have to reload all at once, that's all the Gatekeeper. I hate the Gatekeeper. Please keep that shotgun out of the game. So what shotguns would I have in my meta? Well, similar to the assault rifles, there's usually 3 different types of shotguns. There's the pump shotgun, there's the auto shotgun, and then there's what I like to call the gimmick shotgun as well. So for my pump shotgun, I think actually the most balanced is the ACP Scatter Blaster from the Star Wars season. Now, it's a real shame that more people didn't actually get to use this shotgun and practice with it more, because it's essentially a Sentinel pump shotgun, almost exactly when you look at the stats. However, it has way less structure damage. The blue has 50 in comparison to the 85 of the Sentinel pump, making it feel extremely good. And I don't think many people are complaining that the Sentinel pump feels like a bad shotgun to use. It's just the structure damage is too high. Honorable mention to the Striker pump and the Hammer pump though. I think these are probably the 3 most balanced shotguns we've ever seen. Now, I think an auto shotgun is absolutely required because, you know, little Timmy's on the controller love just to hold down the trigger and just go bang, bang, bang. But if the auto shotgun is too bad, then fighting someone who has a pump shotgun just feels awful. However, if it's too strong, then it feels like just running in people's face is the only play that you can make. So there needs to be a nice balance, and I think that the tactical shotgun fits into that niche very well. Then for the gimmick shotgun, some of these that I really like, I think is probably either going to be the charge shotgun or the ranger. The charge is almost definitely going to be my pick because I think it's a very skillful weapon, but it still is a bit of a gimmicky shotgun. Moving on to the SMGs, I actually really like the current SMG meta that we have. The main negatives that you can get with SMGs, I've just written down in my notes as brrr, which basically is like the original combat SMG or maybe the compact SMG from chapter 1, where if you just run in someone's face and just absolutely wipe you out with an SMG. So I actually think the 2 SMGs we have in the meta right now are perfect, which is the Stinger SMG, since it's been nerfed from its original release in chapter 3, where it's good in box and it's good at a medium range, has a high fire rate, and it has a niche. However, it's not super OP and really busted. And then also the Veiled Precision SMG isn't particularly strong, but it has a niche because it has a scope and the fact that it's 100% hit scan, but not that powerful at range. So yeah, I think the current Chapter 6 Season 4 meta for SMGs is honestly perfect in my opinion. Next up is the pistols. Now the negatives here are fairly obvious, is that most of the time they feel completely useless. If you find a pistol, you're almost always going to drop it for any other weapon, any assault rifle, any other SMG. They almost always in the meta feel pretty bad. Or on the flip side, they feel completely broken and like an almost must carry, like the Mammoth pistol if you played Reload. I'm sure everyone has experienced players just sitting in bushes, sitting far away from them on top of build fights, just tagging them over and over again with the Mammoth pistol. Very frustrating. So what I would like to have as the pistol meta would firstly be the tactical pistol, which is the chapter 4 pistol. I feel like this was by far the most balanced. It had a relatively good damage per second, but it wasn't insanely strong. If you carried like a purple, gold, or even the mythic that was in chapter 4, you felt like it was strong and it could actually deal damage, but a higher level assault rifle was probably still better. So in summary, it was actually usable, unlike most of the pistols throughout Fortnite's history. Then the other pistol I would actually like to put in would be chapter 5's Monarch pistol. Now this is very similar to the Mammoth pistol in the fact that it's high damage from one single bullet. However, this has bullet drop, which makes it not that broken at range because it's harder to hit shots, so most people would probably actually deal more damage at range using a hit scan AR. So you're probably seeing a trend where I think if it's high damage, a single shot with a low risk because you're shooting at a distance, it should probably have bullet drop. And speaking of snipers, now controversial opinion, I actually like snipers in competitive. I know a lot of players don't, and I know a lot of pubs players like them in actual public matches, but I think snipers fit well as long as they are difficult to use, as mentioned with the Monarch pistol. If you look back at bullet drop the way that it used to be OG in chapter 1 before it ever got changed, it was way harder to hit snipes. The bullet went extremely slow and dipped with a massive drop. And I feel like if this amount of drop came back to the game, snipers wouldn't feel as busted at all. I understand why a lot of people don't like them in competitive because it can just be a one-shot kill, but I think they make for a lot of nice clips, they feel good to use, and there's a lot of casual appeal to them, which I think is very important for competitive generally. If they're not in, I'm not going to cry, but I'm just saying, they're fun, okay? Moving on to healing items. Now, I think most of these are relatively simple, so I won't spend too much time on this, but I think some team heals is very good. The Flowberry Fizz just seems like, honestly, the perfect heal item. It's slow, it's clunky, it gives you good mobility, but it's also team heals, so that's going in. And honestly, as long as it's not like an infinite healing medallion or the gold slurps, I'm happy. All right, let's move on to the interesting seasonal specific items, the mobility items. This is basically one of the most important parts of every single Fortnite meta. And if you get it wrong, then the season always feels extremely frustrating. So the things that I don't like about mobility items generally are, firstly, if they are infinite. Infinite items make rotations way too simple, whether it's early, mid, or late game, because you don't really have to think about where you're going. A lot of times you can just use an item to get from point A to point B, wait, and then repeat. So a good example of that would be something like the chainsaw from chapter 5, where basically every single rotate you could just repeatedly use it because it has infinite ammo throughout the entire game. Second, I also dislike mobility items that have no risk or makes you invincible. So another good example of this would be the mist form. You could pretty much just skip any rotate you wanted by turning into an invisible bit of bats. Is it bats? I can't remember. You're flying through the air, whatever it was. If you just saved this and waited until the end game, you could just do the exact same thing. You could wait until the storm catches up, use one, go to the front side, box up, and repeat. It makes rotating far too easy because there's just no risk. And then the third is I don't like mobility items that also just break builds. Shockwaves and a shockwave hammer are just the perfect example of this. So what mobility items would I have in my perfect meta? Well, I would keep a few because I think having a diverse loot pool of this makes a lot of sense. First would be the Flowberry Fizz. This by itself is good mobility, but you usually use this combined with some of the later ones like crash pads and launch pads, which I would also have in. Glider Redeploy, which hasn't been re-added to Battle Royale in years. The bouncer trap item, and then for like a seasonal specific, an item similar to either the kneecapper or the kinetic blade. Assuming the kneecapper didn't have the swing, I think these are absolutely perfect. They don't have unlimited ammo, they have a risk to using them because you're out in the open, and you can't just waste them throughout the entire match. And finally, the medallions, mythics, and exotics. Now, I'm actually going to cover a full video in the next few weeks after Global Championships talking about this, so I won't go too in-depth here. But I want all of these removed from the early game. Now, I'm not a big fan of medallions generally, but if there are a few POIs and drop spots on the map that are extremely better than others, which host medallions, exotics, and mythics, this makes the best teams almost feel like they have to land there. And in lower level games, say if you're in an opens of a tournament and there's one good player or one good team in the lobby, and they land at that drop spot, you have the best team or player in the lobby, now with better loot than any other players in the lobby can get. So you're giving a team who has an advantage, an even bigger advantage for the rest of the game, which to me doesn't make a huge amount of sense. I prefer drop spots to be strong because of their position on the map and the amount of loot in them, not just because they've one really strong item. Now, where I think these can be put into the game, not medallions, because I'll be honest, I just don't like them, they're usually too broken, is in mid-game objectives. I do like currently in the Chapter 6 Season 4 how there's exotics within the bunkers, because you then actually have to fight for them. You have to create a strategy to get there, and then you have to fight for them to get them. However, you are also getting a lot of extra loot and materials from these bunkers and mid-game objectives. So I don't think I would put extremely overpowered exotics in there. I just think the mythics, which are usually one rarity better than gold, would suit much better for a mid-game objective. This means it's worth going for all of that additional loot and some additional firepower, but it's not game-breaking or game-changing like some exotics can be. If you're interested in seeing that video, click the subscribe button down here because I will be uploading that in a few weeks. And then watch whatever this video is that you're getting recommended because it's honestly great.